My name is Natalie, and I'm 28 years old now. I'm sitting in my corner office on the 40th floor of a Fortune 500 building, staring at an old family photo on my desk. 10 years ago, my mother called me a worthless mistake and threw me out with nothing but $200 in a suitcase. Today, I'm the youngest CEO in my industry. Before I share how I went from sleeping in my car to running a $1 million company, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in second chances. And let's dive into the day that changed everything. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family looked perfect from the outside. We had the white colonial house with blue shutters, the manicured lawn, and the luxury SUV in the driveway. My mother, Linda, was a successful real estate agent who sold dreams to other families while slowly destroying ours. She had this way of smiling at church on Sundays that made everyone think we were blessed. Nobody knew what happened when the doors closed. My father, Robert, worked as an accountant for a local firm. He was the kind of man who could calculate complex tax returns, but couldn't figure out how to stand up to his wife. I watched him shrink a little more each year, disappearing into his home office after dinner, emerging only when he was sure Mom had gone to bed. He communicated in sighs and shoulder shrugs, a language I learned to interpret over 18 years. My younger sister Jessica was everything I wasn't. At 16, she was already the captain of the cheerleading squad, maintained straight A's without trying, and had that golden hair that caught sunlight like it was personally attracted to her. Mom paraded Jessica around like a trophy, introducing her as my daughter, the future doctor, or my daughter who got into the National Honor Society. When people asked about me, Mom would say I was going through a phase. The phase she referred to was my love for art. I painted emotions I couldn't express in words, created sculptures from broken things I found, and saw beauty where others saw garbage. My art teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, said I had real talent, that I could get into art school with my portfolio. She helped me apply for scholarships, wrote recommendation letters, and even drove me to portfolio reviews when Mom was too busy with Jessica's activities. Our family dinners were performances in passive aggression. Mom would serve Jessica first, giving her the best portions while discussing her achievements. Then she'd look at me and say things like, "Natalie, maybe if you spent less time with those paints and more time on real subjects, you'd have something to contribute to these conversations." Jessica would look down at her plate, never defending me, but never joining in either. Dad would ask for more salt even when the food was already overseasoned. I remember the night of my senior art exhibition. I'd worked on my pieces for 6 months, pouring everything into a collection I called Invisible Visible. Each piece represented someone in my life, their hidden selves exposed through mixed media. The centerpiece was a portrait made from broken mirrors, reflecting fractured images of whoever looked at it. Mrs. Rodriguez said it was the best student work she'd seen in 20 years. Mom didn't come. She had a showing for a 5-bedroom house that night, she said. Dad was doing tax returns deadline season. Jessica had cheerleading practice. I stood beside my work for 3 hours, watching other parents hug their kids, take pictures, and buy pieces for their homes. Mrs. Rodriguez stayed the whole time, bringing me hot chocolate and telling me that real artists are often misunderstood by their families. Graduation day was supposed to be different. I'd made it through high school despite everything, earned a full scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design, and was valedictorian of the art department. Mom came to the ceremony because appearances mattered, but she spent the entire time on her phone closing deals. When it was time for pictures, she grabbed Jessica, who was just a sophomore, and posed with her instead. "I have to show the Hendersons their daughter at her sister's graduation," she said. "They're considering buying the tutor on Maple Street." The scholarship was my escape plan. $70,000 over 4 years, plus a stipend for supplies. I'd hidden the acceptance letter in my art supply box, the one place Mom never looked. I'd planned everything, counted days until I could leave, imagining a dorm room where I could paint at 3 in the morning without anyone telling me I was wasting my life. 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, Mom sat me down in the living room. The afternoon light made patterns through the lace curtains she'd imported from France. "Natalie," she said, using that voice that meant she'd already decided something, "I've been thinking about your future. You're not going to art school. It's a waste of time and talent. You're going to community college for business administration. Then you'll join my real estate agency." I tried to explain about the scholarship, how it meant I wouldn't cost them anything. She laughed, actually laughed, and said money wasn't the issue. The issue was me embarrassing the family with my childish rebellion. Real careers don't involve playing with paint, she said. Look at your sister. She already knows she wants to be a surgeon. That's ambition. That's success. My 18th birthday fell on a Tuesday. I woke up thinking maybe this year would be different. Maybe turning 18, becoming an adult would change something. I made breakfast for everyone, pancakes shaped like hearts, fresh orange juice and coffee, exactly how each person liked it. Dad mumbled thanks while reading his newspaper. Jessica grabbed a pancake on her way out to early morning practice. Mom didn't come downstairs at all. That afternoon, I went to the school to finalize my scholarship paperwork. Mrs. Rodriguez had set up the appointment weeks ago, but when I arrived, the financial aid officer looked confused. According to our records, she said, scrolling through her computer screen, "Your scholarship was declined last week. Your parent or guardian called and said you wouldn't be attending." The room started spinning. I asked her to check again to show me the records. There it was, a phone call from Linda Morrison declining the full scholarship on behalf of her daughter. The reason given was pursuing other opportunities. The officer said she was sorry, but the scholarship had already been reassigned to another student. I drove home in a rage I'd never felt before. Not the quiet, simmering anger I usually swallowed, but something volcanic. I found Mom in her home office typing property descriptions. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "You canceled my scholarship," I said. It wasn't a question. She continued typing. "I told you art school is not happening. I did what was best for you." "Best for me?" I slammed my hands on her desk, making her coffee cup jump. "You destroyed my future because you're embarrassed by me." That's when she finally looked up, and her face was cold in a way I'd never seen before. "You want to know the truth, Natalie? You want to know why I can't stand to look at you pursuing your ridiculous dreams?" She stood up, walked to her filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder. Inside were papers I'd never seen before. DNA tests, legal documents, photos of a man I didn't recognize. "You were never supposed to exist," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "One stupid night before I married Robert. One mistake that I've been paying for ever since. He's not your real father, did you know that? But he married me anyway, agreed to raise you as his own. Every day you remind me of the worst decision I ever made. And now you want to embarrass me further by becoming some starving artist." The words hit like physical blows. 19 years of feeling out of place suddenly made sense. The way Dad looked at me sometimes like he was seeing someone else. The way Mom could love Jessica so easily while treating me like a burden. "So what am I to you?" I asked, my voice breaking. She walked to the door, opened it, and called for Dad. He came in, saw my face, saw the papers, and immediately looked at the floor. "Robert, pack her things," Mom said. "She's 18 now. She can make her own way." Dad didn't argue. He just nodded and walked upstairs. I heard drawers opening, closets being emptied. Jessica appeared in the doorway, still in her cheerleading uniform, watching everything unfold like a movie she couldn't pause. Within an hour, my life was packed into 2 suitcases. Mom handed me $200 in 20s, folded neatly like a real estate commission. "This is more than you deserve," she said, "but I'm not completely heartless. Don't come back, don't call, don't show up at Jessica's events. You're no longer part of this family." The rain started as I loaded my car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic I'd bought with 3 summers of lifeguarding money. Dad stood in the garage, not helping, not stopping it, just standing. Jessica pressed against the window upstairs, her breath fogging the glass. Mom had already gone back to her office. As I drove away, I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror. The rain was so heavy I had to pull over twice, not because I couldn't see the road, but because I couldn't see through my tears. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot at midnight, crawling into the back seat with a blanket I'd grabbed from my room, trying to figure out how a worthless mistake was supposed to survive. The first 3 nights in my car taught me things about survival they don't teach in school, like how Walmart security does rounds every 2 hours, so you have to move your car to avoid suspicion. How bathroom sinks at 24-hour gas stations can work for basic hygiene if you're creative with paper towels. How $200 disappears fast when every mile costs gas, and every meal comes from whatever's cheapest. I parked in different lots each night. Walmart. Target, the back of a closed mall where other cars gathered like a congregation of the displaced. I learned to recognize the signs of others living in their vehicles. The towels over windows, the careful organization of possessions, the way we avoided eye contact in the morning, all sharing the same shame. By day 4, I was down to $80. I'd applied for jobs everywhere that was walking distance from wherever I parked, fast food, retail, grocery stores. But every application asked for a permanent address, and I couldn't give them a parking lot. Some managers took one look at my wrinkled clothes and knew. Others were kind enough to pretend they'd call. The gym was my salvation for exactly 1 week. Planet Fitness had a free trial, and I used every minute of it. I'd arrive at 5 a.m. when they opened shower-dew laundry in the sink with hand soap, and use the hairdryer to dry what I could. I'd stay until 7, then spend the day job hunting, returning at night to shower again before they closed. When the trial ended, I begged the desk attendant for an extension. She said no, but slipped me trial passes for 3 other gym locations. On day 10, I was down to $30 and had eaten nothing but dollar menu items for 2 days. My car was running on fumes, and I couldn't afford to keep moving it. I settled in the parking lot behind a strip mall behind a Mexican bakery called La Esperanza. I figured commercial lots were safer than residential streets, less likely to draw police attention. That's where Maria found me at 6 a.m. on day 11. She was opening her bakery when she noticed my car windows fogged from my breathing, me curled in the back seat. She knocked on the window gently, like she was afraid of startling a wounded animal. When I rolled down the window, she didn't ask why I was there. She asked if I wanted coffee and fresh bread. Her English was accented but clear, and her eyes held a kindness that made me cry. I followed her into the bakery, which smelled like cinnamon and yeast and hope. She heated up fresh conchas and made me café de olla while I sat at a small table near the kitchen. Then she asked my story, and for some reason, I told her everything. Maria listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or clicking her tongue. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then said, "My family threw me away too, 30 years ago. I wanted to open a business. They said women don't do that. They said I was bringing shame, so I came here with nothing, just like you." She offered me a job that day. Early morning shift helping with baking minimum wage, but cash, so no address required. And there was a small room above the bakery, she said technically storage, but it had a window and a tiny bathroom. $50 a week taken from my pay if I wanted. I took it immediately. The room was maybe 8 by 10 feet with a slanted ceiling and pipes that clanged at night. But it had a lock-a-bed Maria brought from her house, and a hot plate she said I could use after hours. It was the first time in 11 days I could fully exhale. Working at the bakery meant 4 a.m. starts kneading dough until my arms ached, learning Spanish curse words when the ovens acted up, and discovering that Maria's tough exterior hid a heart that had been broken and rebuilt many times. She taught me to make pan dulce, but more importantly, she taught me about resilience. The morning shift ended at noon, which gave me time for a second job. I found work at a diner 2 blocks away, lunch and dinner shifts, where the owner paid under the table and didn't ask questions. The waitresses were all women with stories, single mothers and students, and others who'd been kicked out of somewhere. We pooled tips, covered each other's shifts, and created a makeshift family bound by necessity. After the diner closed at 10 p.m., I had a third job cleaning offices. A crew of mostly undocumented workers who moved through buildings like ghosts, making messes disappear. The supervisor, Carlos, was Maria's nephew. He paid cash weekly and never asked why a young American girl was scrubbing toilets at midnight. Between the 3 jobs, I was making about $600 a week. After paying Maria for the room and buying basic necessities, I saved everything else. My meals were bakery leftovers, diner mistakes, and whatever food people left in office fridges. I owned 3 outfits, all from Goodwill, which I washed in Maria's sink and hung from pipes to dry. On weekends, I painted. Maria let me use the bakery's back wall as a canvas, and I created murals of our neighborhood. People started coming just to see them taking pictures, buying extra pastries while they admired the art. An old man brought me paint supplies he'd kept from his deceased wife's hobby room. A teacher donated canvases her school was throwing away. I started selling small paintings at the flea market on Sundays. $5 for little ones, 20 for larger pieces. They weren't masterpieces, but they were honest, painted with the exhaustion and hope of someone rebuilding from nothing. A regular customer, Mrs. Chen, bought one every week, claiming she was decorating a very large house. Later, I learned she was giving them to other struggling people, little pieces of beauty in hard lives. 6 months passed this way. Wake up, work, 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 paint, sleep, repeat. My hands were permanently stained with flour and paint. My back ached from constant motion. But I was surviving. More than that, I was building something, though I didn't know what yet. Maria would sometimes find me asleep at the table, my head on sketches of business plans I'd drawn on napkins, ideas forming even in exhaustion. The unexpected turn came on a Thursday morning that started like any other. Mr. Thompson, one of our regulars, arrived at his usual time, 7:15 sharp. He was in his 70s, always wore a suit, even though he'd been retired for 5 years, and ordered the same thing every day, 2 conchas, 1 coffee black. He liked to sit by the window and read newspapers on an actual tablet, which he operated with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. That morning, I was sketching on a napkin during a brief break. It was a business concept I'd been developing, something I called the Healing Canvas Cafe. The idea was simple, but revolutionary: combine art therapy with a wellness cafe where people could paint while they processed trauma, guided by trained therapists surrounded by others on similar journeys. I'd drawn floor plans, profit projections, and demographic analyses all on bakery napkins I kept in a folder. Mr. Thompson noticed me working and asked what I was drawing. Usually I'd have brushed it off, but something about that morning made me honest. I showed him the napkin, explained the concept, talked about the market need I'd identified through my own experience and observations. I expected him to nod politely and return to his newspaper. Instead, he put down his tablet and really looked at what I'd created. Then he said something that changed everything. I was CEO of a healthcare company for 30 years. This is the most innovative mental health concept I've seen. Are you looking for investors? I almost laughed. I was an 18-year-old homeless girl working 3 jobs. What investor would take me seriously? But Mr. Thompson was already pulling out his phone, making calls, setting up meetings. He told me later that he'd been watching me for months, seeing how I worked, how I treated people, how I never complained, despite obviously struggling. He'd been successful enough to know that the best investments aren't in ideas but in people. And he believed in me. The first meeting was a disaster. I showed up in my least wrinkled Goodwill outfit to a conference room full of people in $1,000 suits. They asked about my experience, education, and business acumen. I had none of the traditional answers, but Mr. Thompson had coached me to tell my story instead, to explain how I understood the market because I was the market. Out of 15 pitches over 6 months, 14 said no. They liked the idea, but not the messenger. Too young, too inexperienced, too risky. Each rejection felt like my mother's voice echoing in professional language. Mr. Thompson never wavered, though. After each failure, we'd refine the pitch, strengthen the business plan, and try again. The 15th pitch was to Sarah Wellington, a venture capitalist who'd made her fortune in tech but was looking to invest in social impact ventures. She was also, I learned later, someone who'd been kicked out of her house at 16 for being gay. She saw something in my story that the others hadn't seen, or maybe she saw herself. Sarah didn't just invest money. She invested time, connections, and expertise. She connected me with lawyers who worked pro bono to set up the corporate structure. She introduced me to contractors who'd renovate spaces at cost. She found therapists who believed in the vision enough to work for equity initially. Most importantly, she taught me how to be a CEO, not just a survivor with a good idea. Finding the first location took 3 months. We needed something accessible but affordable, welcoming but professional. We found it in an old print shop in a transitioning neighborhood, a space that had good bones but needed everything else. Maria co-signed the lease, putting her bakery as collateral, a gesture of faith that still makes me cry when I think about it. The renovation was brutal. I worked construction during the day and my other jobs at night to keep money coming in. We demolished walls, installed plumbing, and built therapy rooms that felt safe rather than clinical. Local artists donated pieces for the walls. A furniture store gave us damaged items they couldn't sell but we could repair. Every corner was built with sweat equity and community investment. 6 months before opening, we started building buzz. I shared my story on social media, not the polished version, but the real one. The posts went viral in mental health communities. People started volunteering, wanting to be part of something that might have saved them. A local news station did a feature on the young entrepreneur turning pain into purpose. though I hated the sensationalized angle. We hired carefully. Every therapist had to understand that healing happens in many forms. Every barista had to be trained in mental health first aid. Every artist facilitator had to believe that creativity could save lives. Many were people like me rebuilding from their own wreckage. We weren't just opening a business, we were creating a movement. Opening day was scheduled for exactly 2 years after I'd been kicked out. It felt like poetic justice, though Sarah warned me about attaching too much meaning to dates. The week before, everything that could go wrong did. The health inspector found violations that cost thousands to fix. The insurance company raised our rates. The espresso machine died dramatically, shooting steam like a dying dragon. But we made it work. Maria organized the emergency fundraiser at her bakery. Mr. Thompson called in favors from contractor friends. Sarah wrote another check. The community we'd built showed up when we needed them most. By opening morning, everything was ready, imperfect, but ready. The opening of Healing Canvas Cafe exceeded every projection we'd made. The line wrapped around the block by 7 a.m., a mixture of curious neighbors, mental health advocates, and people who'd been following our journey online. The news crews that showed up expecting a feel-good story found something more, a community celebrating healing as revolution. That first day, we served 300 customers. Some came for coffee, others for art therapy sessions, but most came for the possibility of something different. I watched a veteran paint his nightmares into something beautiful. A teenage girl who'd been cutting herself learned to cut canvas instead. A mother processing divorce found her voice through abstract expressionism. This wasn't just a business, it was alchemy, turning pain into art, into healing. Within 6 months, we needed to expand. The demand for our services outpaced our capacity by 300%. Sarah helped us raise a Series A round of $2 million. This time, investors were fighting to get in. The girl they dismissed was now running a profitable business with a waiting list for services and franchise inquiries from 12 cities. Year 2 brought 3 new locations. Each one was staffed by people we'd trained, many of whom had been customers first. The business model was proven therapy didn't have to happen in sterile offices. Healing could be communal, and art could be medicine. Universities started sending psychology students to study our methods. Insurance companies began covering our services as legitimate therapy. The challenge came from copycats. Within 18 months, 5 similar concepts opened in our city alone. They had better funding, flashier spaces, and aggressive marketing, but they lacked what we had: authenticity. You can't fake understanding trauma. Our customers could tell the difference between business and mission, and they chose mission. Then COVID hit. March of 2020, we had to close all physical locations indefinitely. Our revenue dropped to zero overnight. The investors panicked. Sarah called emergency board meetings. Everyone expected us to fold like so many other small businesses. But I remembered being homeless, how creativity was sometimes all I had, and I refused to give up. We pivoted hard to digital. Within 2 weeks, we launched Virtual Healing Canvas, an online platform where people could do guided art therapy from home. We shipped art supplies to subscribers. Our therapists led sessions over video. What seemed like destruction became evolution. People who couldn't physically come to us could now access services from anywhere. The platform exploded. By month 2, we had subscribers in all 50 states and 12 countries. Revenue surpassed our pre-COVID numbers by month 4. Tech companies started calling, wanting to offer our services as employee benefits. We raised a Series B of $10 million in the middle of a pandemic, valuing the company at $50 million. The success brought attention I hadn't anticipated. Forbes did a profile. Inc. magazine put me on their cover. From homeless to CEO, how Natalie Morrison built a mental health empire. I hated the sensationalism, but understood it brought awareness to our mission. Every interview was an opportunity to talk about the epidemic of family rejection, the connection between trauma and creativity, and the power of chosen family. With growth came difficult decisions. Venture capitalists wanted us to prioritize profit over mission. Board members pushed for cheaper therapists, less art supplies, and more aggressive expansion. I fought every battle, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sarah and Maria backing me. We were building something sacred, and I wouldn't let it become another corporate wellness program. By year 3, we had 20 locations across 5 states and 300 employees. The virtual platform served 50,000 active users. We'd helped facilitate healing for over 100,000 people. The foundation I'd started, Canvas of Hope, provided free services to homeless youth. We were doing exactly what I'd sketched on those napkins, but bigger than I dared imagine. The IPO discussion started year 4. Investment banks courted us, promising billion-dollar valuations. The board was eager, seeing massive returns. But going public meant answering to shareholders who might not understand that our success came from putting healing before profits. I stalled, negotiated, and fought for provisions that would protect our mission. During this time, my personal life evolved too. I'd been so focused on building the business that I'd barely built a life. Maria became the mother I'd needed, teaching me to cook, celebrating my wins, and holding me through losses. Mr. Thompson walked me down the aisle when I married James, a therapist I'd hired who understood my damage because he had his own. The team became family. We celebrated birthdays, grieved losses, and supported each other through everything. Many were people who'd been rejected by their birth families for various reasons: sexuality, career choices, addiction, recovery. We joked that Healing Canvas was actually a misfit rehabilitation program disguised as a business. But success has a way of reaching people you've left behind. 3 years into the business, Jessica found me on Instagram. Her message was simple: "I'm sorry, I was young and scared. Can we talk?" The message from Jessica sat unread for 3 days. Every time I opened Instagram, I'd see it waiting, a portal to a past I'd worked so hard to transform. James noticed my distraction, the way I'd stare at my phone without actually looking at anything. Maria, in her direct way, told me that ignoring poison doesn't make it less toxic. Sometimes you have to acknowledge it to neutralize it. When I finally opened the message, there was more. Jessica had sent photos of her life college graduation, her residency acceptance, her small apartment in Boston. She looked older, tired, in the way medical residents always do, but there was something else in her eyes, recognition maybe of what it costs to chase approval that never comes. Her following messages revealed the family collapse. Mom and Dad divorced 2 years after I left. Without me as the family scapegoat, Mom had turned her criticism toward Dad, then Jessica. The perfect daughter couldn't be perfect enough. Every achievement was met with how it could have been better. The cheerleading captain should have been valedictorian too. The medical school acceptance should have been Harvard, not Boston University. Dad had moved to a small apartment downtown, started therapy, and learned at 58 that he'd spent 40 years disappearing to avoid conflict. He'd apparently tried to find me, Jessica said, but didn't know how to reach out after participating in my exile, even passively. He'd kept newspaper clippings about the business she'd found them when helping him move. Mom's real estate empire had crumbled during COVID. She'd overleveraged, believing her own sales pitches about endless growth. When the market shifted, she lost everything: the business, the house, the image she'd protected so fiercely. She was living in a one-bedroom rental, working as a receptionist at another agency. The mighty had fallen, but I felt no satisfaction, just a hollow recognition of how pride precedes destruction. Jessica wanted to meet. She was coming to Denver for a medical conference. Could we have coffee? I agreed, choosing neutral ground at a hotel lobby cafe, not my Healing Canvas locations. I didn't want to give her access to my sacred spaces. Not yet, maybe never. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd grown larger than my memories. We sat across from each other, two strangers who'd shared a childhood, but never a connection. She ordered tea with honey. I had black coffee. The conversation started with medical small talk, her residency struggles, my business expansion. Safe topics for unsafe relationships. Then she said what she'd really come to say. Mom knows about your success. She's been following everything online. She wants to reconnect. The word reconnect was interesting. It implied there had been a connection to begin with, something to restore rather than create. I asked Jessica what Mom wanted, though we both knew the answer. She wanted forgiveness without apology, access without accountability, the benefits of relationship without the work of repair. Jessica admitted Mom had asked her to arrange this meeting to test the waters. She'd been sending Jessica articles about the business, suggesting ways she could help me expand, as if her expertise in failure qualified her to guide my success. The audacity was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. But Jessica surprised me with what came next. I said no. I told her she had to reach out herself if she wanted to talk to you. That's why she's here in Denver. She's at the conference hotel waiting to see if you'll meet her. The manipulation was breathtaking. Coming to my city uninvited, using Jessica as an intermediary, waiting in ambush at a professional event. It was every controlling behavior from my childhood just repackaged with desperation instead of authority. I thanked Jessica for the warning and started to leave. Wait, she said. I didn't come here for her. I came for me. I need to apologize not for what I did as a kid, but for what I didn't do. I watched her destroy you, and I stayed silent because I was terrified of becoming you. But I became something worse, her accomplice. We talked for 3 more hours about the price of conditional love, the exhaustion of perpetual performance, the way trauma gets passed down like family heirlooms nobody wants, but everyone keeps. Jessica was in therapy now, unlearning decades of toxic perfectionism. She was gay hadn't told mom might never tell her. She was building her own life finally at 26. I gave her my real number, not the business one. We weren't sisters yet, might never be in the traditional sense, but we were survivors of the same war, and that created its own bond. She promised to warn me if mom tried anything else, and I believed her. The next day, I was giving a keynote at the same conference talking about innovative approaches to mental health treatment. Halfway through my presentation, I saw her, mom sitting in the back row wearing a suit that tried too hard to look expensive. She'd aged dramatically, her harsh beauty softened by exhaustion and loss. Our eyes met across the room, and I didn't stop speaking, didn't stumble, didn't acknowledge her beyond a blink. I finished my presentation to standing ovation. 300 healthcare professionals applauding ideas that mom had called worthless. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. As I left the stage, she intercepted me by the exit, moving with the determined stride I remembered from childhood. Natalie, we need to talk. No, we don't, I replied, matching her directness with my own. She tried another angle, claiming she'd changed, that losing everything had taught her humility. But humility isn't a costume you wear to get what you want. It's a fundamental restructuring of self, and she was still performing just a different show. She mentioned the business, how proud she was, how she'd always known I was special. The revisionist history was impressive in its boldness. I stopped her mid-sentence. Linda, I said, using her first name deliberately. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it or because you've asked for it properly, but because holding on to anger at you is holding poison in my body. I forgive you for my freedom, not for your comfort. She reached for my arm and I stepped back. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean access to my life, my success, or my peace. You made your choice when you called me a worthless mistake. I've proven you wrong, but not for you. Never for you. Security appeared, probably called by Sarah, who'd been watching from across the lobby. As they escorted mom out, she turned back once, and for a moment I saw something real in her eyes. Not love exactly, but recognition of what she'd lost. Not me specifically, but the chance to know who I'd become. That night I processed everything with my chosen family. Maria made me tea and told me about the day she'd refused to let her own mother back into her life after success. Mr. Thompson shared how his father had died, waiting for an apology that never came. Sarah reminded me that DNA doesn't determine destiny. James held me while I cried not from sadness, but from relief. The confrontation I'd imagined 1,000 ways had happened, and I'd survived it. More than survived, I'd stayed centered in my truth. The 18-year-old girl sleeping in a car couldn't have done that. The 28-year-old CEO could. I made 2 decisions that night. First, I set up an education trust for Jessica. Not as an obligation, but as a gift to someone finding their own way out. Second, I offered Dad a job in our accounting department, not because I owed him anything, but because everyone deserves a second chance to choose courage over comfort. He took it quietly, gratefully, and we built something careful and real over time. Mom never contacted me again directly. I heard through professional networks that she'd tried to leverage our connection for business opportunities, claiming credit for my drive and ambition. When that didn't work, she disappeared from my narrative entirely, a ghost of trauma past that no longer haunted my present. 10 years have passed since that night in the Walmart parking lot, and the journey from worthless mistake to CEO still feels surreal some mornings. The healing canvas has grown beyond my wildest napkin sketches. We operate in 20 states, serve 500,000 people annually, and employ over 2,000 individuals, 70% of whom came to us with their own stories of rejection and redemption. The IPO happened last year. We rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, and I thought about Mom watching the news, seeing her worthless mistake valued at $500 million. But the real value wasn't in the numbers. It was in the teenage boy who didn't kill himself because he found us first. The mother who learned to paint her grief instead of drinking it. The veteran who discovered that art could express what words couldn't touch. My foundation canvas of hope has provided free services to over 50,000 homeless youth. We partner with shelters, offering not just art therapy, but job training, hiring directly from our programs. Every person we employ knows what it's like to be discarded, and they bring that understanding to every interaction. We're not just a business, we're a revolution disguised as a corporation. The memoir came out 6 months ago, From Mistake to Miracle, a journey of rejection, resilience, and redemption. It hit the New York Times bestseller list in its first week. The reviews called it raw, inspiring, and necessary. But the messages from readers meant more than any ranking. Thousands of people wrote to say they saw themselves in my story, that it gave them hope or courage, or just the knowledge that they weren't alone. I still live modestly, despite the success. James and I bought a small house near Maria's bakery, where I still help on Sunday mornings kneading dough and remembering where healing started. We're expecting our first child, a daughter we'll raise, to know she's never a mistake, always a miracle, even when she fails, especially when she struggles. Maria is technically retired, but still comes to every board meeting, keeping us honest with her directness. Mr. Thompson passed last year, but not before seeing the company go public. He died knowing his belief in a homeless teenager had transformed into something that would outlive us all. His last words to me were simple: "You were never worthless. You were just waiting to be valued correctly." Jessica and I have built something real, not the sisterhood we might have had, but something consciously chosen. She's doing her residency in psychiatry now, specializing in family trauma. She volunteers at our Boston location, understanding firsthand how family can be both wound and weapon. We talk weekly, sharing victories and failures, building what should have always been. Dad and I have found our rhythm. He runs our accounting department with the precision he always had, but now with a voice he's discovered. In therapy, he learned he'd been depressed for decades, mistaking numbness for peace. Now he paints in our community workshops terrible abstract pieces that he loves creating. He's 65 and finally alive. The business continues evolving. We've partnered with major healthcare systems, integrating art therapy into traditional treatment. Insurance companies now cover our services universally. We're in talks with school districts, bringing healing to children before trauma calcifies into dysfunction. The girl who wasn't allowed to paint is now painting possibilities for millions. But success hasn't erased the scars. I still have nights where I wake up in panic thinking I'm back in that car, that everything since has been a dream. I still struggle with feeling deserving of love, success, and peace. The voice that called me worthless still whispers sometimes, usually when I'm tired or stressed or facing new challenges. That's why I keep the photo on my desk, the family portrait from before everything shattered. Not as nostalgia, but as reminder. That girl in the picture smiling despite everything, trying so hard to belong somewhere. She was never wanted. She deserved better. And I gave it to her not through revenge or proving anyone wrong, but through proving myself right. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mom hadn't kicked me out that night. Would I have found my strength? Would I have built this empire? Would I have helped thousands heal? Maybe being called a worthless mistake was exactly what I needed to prove that every human has worth, and no one is a mistake. The truth is more complex. I succeeded not because of trauma, but despite it. The rejection redirected me, but the resilience was always mine. The pain became purpose, but purpose existed before pain. I wasn't made worthy by achievement. I was always worthy, and finally found spaces that recognized it. Your beginning doesn't define your ending. You do. But more than that, your worst moment can become your greatest teacher if you let it educate rather than destroy you. Being thrown away taught me to never throw myself away. Being called worthless taught me to value everything. Being rejected by blood taught me that water can be thicker when it's mixed with choice struggle and conscious love. This story could end with forgiveness, and in a way it does. But not the forgiveness Mom wanted, the kind that erases consequences and restores privilege. Instead, it ends with the radical forgiveness I gave myself for not being perfect enough to earn unconditional love, for believing toxic voices, for taking so long to recognize my own value. If you're watching this from a car tonight, from a shelter, from a home where you're not safe or seen or valued, know this: your current circumstance is not your conclusion. The people who should love you might fail, but that failure isn't your fault or your future. You can build something beautiful from broken pieces. You can create family from strangers who see your worth. You can transform worthless into priceless, but only if you survive today to build tomorrow. The last thing I want to say is this: thank you to everyone who's watched this story, who's shared their own stories in return, who's made me realize that rejection is universal, but so is resilience. If my journey resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moments of rejection became your redirection? What mistakes became your miracles? Please hit that like button if this story touched you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories of transformation, and share this with someone who needs to remember they're not alone. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who might be sleeping in their cars tonight, wondering if tomorrow is worth seeing. It is. You are worth it. You were never a mistake, just misunderstood by people too broken to see your beauty. Thank you for letting me share this with you. Until next time, remember, you're not defined by who rejected you, but by how you chose to rise.